So this panel is going to dive into that current state of Bitcoin. It will be moderated by none other than Joe Nakamoto, journalist, content creator, and traveling Bitcoin advocate. And I really do encourage you guys to visit Joe's channel because he's got pretty amazing content.
Thank you. That was such a lovely slow clap as well.
Also joining us will be Jack Lee, Bitcoin pioneer, Parker Lewis, author of Gradually, Then Suddenly, Rikki, Bitcoin podcaster and traveler, and also joining us soon, very soon, will be Abubakar, CEO of Recursive Capital. So I'm pumped to hear from all of these fine gentlemen.
There is Abubakar, sharp on time. Welcome down, man. How you doing? Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Are you having a good time in Prague so far? You having a good time? Yeah? We can make some noise. It's the final day, the final afternoon. Let's have some fun. Okay, so I have a fantastic panel on the left of me today, and we're going to take you on a tour around the world about Bitcoin. But before we get to the panel, I'm going to go through the plan, the strategy for it. So we're going to have a little introduction, which, by the way, we've just completed. Great. We're now going to do some audience participation, followed by a show of hands from you guys, then some more targeted questions, a big debate, possibly a punch-up and a fight, and then some hugs at the end. How does that sound?
Good, great.
Fantastic. Okay, so first thing is questions for you guys. So I want you to raise your hands. This is about the general state of Bitcoin adoption where you are. So do you think that the state of Bitcoin adoption where you are is good? Raise your hands if you think it's good. We're going to go on a sliding scale upwards. So some of you think it's good. Okay. What about, do you think it's really good? Raise your hands if you think it's really, really good. Okay, one very confident dude. What about it's absolutely phenomenal, it's excellent, you know, everyone's onboarded, orange-pilled, the state of Bitcoin adoption is fantastic? No, still the same guy. Okay, I want to move to where you are, but this is what we're working with today, guys. What about you guys? What's the state of Bitcoin adoption? We're going to start off with you, Rikki. What's the state of Bitcoin adoption where you are in Italy?
Poor.
Oh.
Poor.
As in too many poor people? Or?
Not yet. Not yet. But oh yeah, it's so early. Italians still need to understand what is not working in our economic system, and that Bitcoin happens right next. We're not there yet.
Okay, awesome. So poor. I'm going to keep this in my head for later. Abubakar, representing the voice of Nigeria / Africa, because I don't know if you've noticed, but we have someone from almost every corner of the globe here, which is pretty cool. So Abubakar, Nigeria, how would you rate Bitcoin adoption in Nigeria currently?
Can you don't hear it?
Oh,
yeah.
I can hear him perfectly, so I'm going to carry it. No, I'm kidding. Please, could we turn on Abubakar's microphone? In the meantime, we'll go to Parker. Parker, the voice of the US today. How do you rate it?
First off, mic check. Okay, we're good. We're good. I would say Bitcoin adoption in the US is great. I think that there's still obviously a lot of work to do, and far more people don't understand Bitcoin than do understand Bitcoin. But Bitcoin adoption is organic, and for everyone in the audience who has come to understand Bitcoin, it's difficult to put yourself back in that place of having had Bitcoin click, and that once Bitcoin clicks, it makes all the sense in the world, and it becomes more intuitive over time. But what we're seeing increasingly in the US is more and more businesses specifically begin to accept Bitcoin as payment, but also it clicking for more individuals. And so I would still say that there's not more than 1 out of 100 or 2 out of 100, but I think in this perspective, that's actually good, and it's just also going to be where it's at, and we need to be focusing on the next 10x and not getting 100% of people, because that's the way that Bitcoin organically grows. It grows from friend to friend, family to family.
Yeah, big time. And of course, you have the one thing that a lot of European countries don't have, which is the ETF as well, which is a huge onboarding tool. Okay, Abubakar, how are you? Can I hear you?
Hello.
Can you guys hear Abubakar? Yeah, welcome into the building. Great.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic.
Thanks
so
again.
we'll jump back over to Nigeria.
Yeah. So in general, scrap the ranking. I think one thing I'd say, it's not helpful. And thank you for clarifying. In general, I would say Nigeria leads on P2P markets. So in terms of raw adoption, yes, we definitely rank really high. In terms of daily use, we're not at a stage where people actually use Bitcoin on a day-to-day in terms of like spending in a mall, a shop. It's still close to people who are actually other Bitcoiners that have shops and malls. And in terms of moving forward, I think the transition will likely be around more the medium exchange in terms of focus for builders on the ground, for entrepreneurs. But yeah, for now, it's definitely a shit ton of volumes from folks to B2B and things like that. But retail is still not as big as it should be, given the large amount of adoption that we have in terms of both in the consciousness as well as just P2P markets.
Nice, and we'll get a bit deeper into the why of the Bitcoin in each country in a little bit. Jack, representing the voice of Taiwan/Asia/China, what would you like to sort of represent today if we're doing the Eurovision of Bitcoin?
I can quickly go over, let's say, Asia Pacific.
Okay.
But it's not the same for the whole region. For example, Japan has there's a rule for Bitcoin. So it's adopted early, however, it's very strict. So, I mean, still relatively, still very early for example, for Japan. I mean, especially since 2018, the coin check hack. Yeah, so still slow. People still not that interested for most people. I think for China, or I would say more like a Chinese community, because, back to 6 or 7 years ago, when the ICO boom, the crypto market, indeed it's brought up all the Bitcoin and crypto kind of fans, right? So maybe people not understand Bitcoin because of Bitcoin, but because of trading on crypto. So still, I mean, that's a quite good amount of awareness for the greater China people, including China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. As for Southeast Asia, I would say, still, I mean, that's a two-part for Southeast Asia. One is that because there's more unbanked people, like Africa, so some people use the Bitcoin or even Lightning payment as the payment rail. For example, Philippines, aligned with the strike for the Send Global, that kind of program. Indeed, and also Vietnam as well, they have a conference. Also Indonesia is selective, not yet. So I think Southeast Asia, mainly we think will be more adaptive because of the global remittance and the payment.
Yeah, no, super interesting. And you did a really good job there of covering pretty much all of Asia Pacific there. Nice one. Can I just push back on one point about the crypto Bitcoin scene? Because we were recently in Hong Kong together,
yes,
and we were both, for want of a better word, we were disgusted about the level of sort of crypto adoption as opposed to pure Bitcoin adoption. We were at a Bitcoin conference where it felt a lot more like a crypto conference. Can you explain to the Europeans, I mean, it's probably 99% European here today, what is that? Why is it that way in China? Why is it so crypto heavy? Sorry, Asia. Why is it so crypto heavy? Why are there no maxis?
Yeah, good question. Indeed, I also have the same experience as you did. Five weeks ago, right? This is the first Bitcoin Asia conference hosted by Bitcoin Magazine, right? So I was highly expected. However, I think 95% of people I met, mainly either crypto or like ordinal layer 2 token of a Bitcoin. So of course, I've been a little bit disappointed. However, when I think further, why? Because as I said earlier, if someone remember back to 2017 and 18 when the ICO boom, the crypto exchange started to be dominated by Chinese-based crypto exchange, which is Binance just started, become number one, Huobi, OKX, etc. So indeed, at that time, many, I mean, even U.S. conferences, they welcome Chinese people, because the crypto dominance in China. So why the reason is think further is because I would say, number one is the lack of education about Bitcoin, okay? Number two, I think it seems like similar to those P2P finance, for example, in China before, and then government crackdown. So still people think that's the good investment instrument for make money. to issue token. I think that kind of culture, I think it will take time. It will take time to be educated and then to be adopted. But I think it's still very early. So I believe U.S. will lead the way.
Okay.
Maybe Hong Kong, and then later China, Taiwan, I think will follow.
I mean, it kind of leads me on to a point I wanted to address to the panel generally, is that doesn't Bitcoin need to solve a problem, like an immediate problem, in order for there to be, a decent level of adoption? Like in the US, for example, it's a savings tool primarily. There's not a lot of remittance or peer-to-peer use cases. Is that fair to say? And that's because the problem it's solving is savings accounts, right? Am I perhaps pushing it a bit too far in the wrong direction there? Because it's obviously self-sovereign what do you reckon, Parker?
Yeah, I disagree a little bit. I think most places all over the world it's typically used as a saving mechanism. I think the way I think about it is there's a very logical order to Bitcoin. You first have to understand why Bitcoin will store value in order to want to save in Bitcoin, and that the logical progression from once you figure out that Bitcoin will store value and that you want to save in Bitcoin, that you then want to use it as a medium of exchange. And that doesn't mean that it might reverse orders in certain markets or economies based on idiosyncratic differences, but I think generally globally, that just is the way that Bitcoin adoption goes. It's functionally easier to exchange some Bitcoin, even if it's peer-to-peer for some fiat, than it is to invest in infrastructure to accept Bitcoin payment directly for your business. And that when you think about it in that context, that it's a two-layered knowledge curve. The first thing to understand Bitcoin and why it stores value, as well as then why Bitcoin payments are important. You have to learn those two things separately. And so I think it's just a matter of educating people in America about why the Bitcoin rails are just as good, if not better. And so I think that is well underway, but still very early. And the reception that we're getting in the States is great. It's just early.
Okay, just early. I mean, are you surprised by people spending their sats at Bitcoin Prague? They're buying stuff with their sats, they're spending their sats on lunch. Does that surprise you from the American viewpoint?
Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, not at all. Whether it's America, Canada, I think there's a strong contingent within the Bitcoin community to recognize that this is important. So whether it's at Bitcoin conferences in the U.S. or local events at Bitcoin Commons or Bitcoin Park in Nashville, there's more small kind of city centers opening in Denver and San Francisco, and so those kind of foster a lot of in-person payments. And all the conferences at each conference in the U.S., they're selling things for Bitcoin. If people are not accepting Bitcoin for payment, that's an exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, and they're probably doing it wrong, right?
No, they're doing it the right way.
No, isn't they're doing it wrong, as in they should be accepting Bitcoin.
Oh, no, I was saying everyone in the U.S. at conferences accepts Bitcoin.
Okay, got it, cool. I mean, Rikki, what do you make of this? Bitcoin is a payments tool. We don't need it, right? You've got Apple Pay, you've got Android Pay, you can pay in cash here as well. What's the point?
The point is that depends. I mean, long perspective, maybe we don't need it now. Of course, Europeans are luckier than others, but still, I believe uncensorable money matter. I see potentially a system of mass surveillance in Europe as well. So this is not something that necessarily cannot happen in Europe as well. But also there is something more. On a long time perspective, I personally believe that Europe, the Western civilization actually, will face a long period of social, economic, and political unrest soon. Great. And historically, Europe, as Africa, has been divided for a very long time. We have a lot of diversities. And when social unrest hits, diversity is dangerous, become dangerous. So one of the reasons why I believe Bitcoin matters in Europe is because we want to separate the state and the money from the money as fast as we can, because if we don't put an end to the unlimited spending for military, I have the feeling that that can be extremely dangerous, especially for Europe, because it is of an extremely diverse and divided continent.
Hear, hear. Not very exciting, though, or something to look forward to there. We'll finish on a note of hope a little bit later. Abubakar, in Nigeria, a lot of people aren't able to save. You know, there is dollar-a-day poverty in certain parts of Nigeria. There is no means of saving. I've seen this personally in places like Cuba and Senegal and South Africa, and you're seeing Bitcoin used in, let's call them weird and wonderful ways, but there's not necessarily what I experienced, and I'm sure what lots of people here experienced in their Bitcoin journeys, that you realize, this number go up thing is kind of cool. Maybe I'll go a bit deeper, and then your brain goes off and you start to discover the things that Parker was mentioning, the stuff that Rikki was mentioning. So how does that pan out in Nigeria? Like what problem does the Bitcoin solve in the state of Nigeria?
Oh, a variety. I mean, I'll give a quick example. On the economic side in Nigeria, we have a ton of things to deal with. One, with regards to inflation. Two, there's a food crisis. Three, we're one of the first countries in the world to issue a CBDC, which has been a total flop, which again is to the testament of the fact that Bitcoin actually does solve problems with regards to remittances, medium of exchange, savings, and just being a money that actually works for a lot of people. Because again, we're shut out from virtually every single financial rail, or at least we're on the verge of being shut down. So for a lot of people, they feel this access to instant global money is revolutionary. One, two, it unlocks a lot of economic opportunities, and three, we're starting to see a lot more innovation come out of Africa that is beyond, the run-of-the-mill things that we're seeing outside of Africa, specifically with parts that are more mature, so to speak, on the Bitcoin side. So in general, back to the economic crisis in Nigeria, just last year alone, because we had a recent election, we have a lot of cash really outside of private banks. A lot of the economic policies on the government side are ineffective because you need a lot of the money inside of banks for them to be effective, because the banks are the ones that are essentially providing a lot of these on the economic side. So for us, the technique that they tried to use was, we have a mandate essentially on the CBN side, the Central Bank of Nigeria, which requires the bank to issue new notes after every 8 years. So they felt, okay, this is a good way for us to tighten in the cash controls. So they tried to issue new notes and then have people mandated to go into banks and actually exchange these new notes as a way to soak up all the extant cash. But the problem was we didn't print enough cash for the demand that was being anticipated, because again, it's very difficult to tell how much cash is in circulation when they're outside of private banks. So we had a crash crunch essentially in the first half of last year, which trickled down into controls around withdrawal limits, which increased the tightening of cash. And then there was also the fight for the USD NGN pair on the currency level. So the government tried to restrict US dollar access, which also catalyzed a lot of airlines leaving the country because they had so much USD that was stuck that needed to be repatriated in terms of the funds. So for average people, what does this mean? It means, one, you don't necessarily have money that's outside of Africa through domiciliary accounts because, again, limits were increased because they're trying to squeeze in the USD access. Two, on the ground, you had Naira that was essentially bifurcated. Actually, I say demarcated into 4 different Nairas, which the e-Naira, which no one uses, thank God. Bank notes.
Because that one's the CBDC, right?
That one's the CBDC. And then we had banknotes, which are a totally separate Naira. Then we had the new notes and the old notes, and all 4 of those at a point in time actually had different dollar rates. So for a lot of people, they were earning in Naira, which was losing tremendous value. And there was really no means on the national level, from a currency point of view, of a medium of exchange on that level that's both fungible and actually has value, to the point where there's a period of around, I think, a week where people started using even shillings and shells and different currencies. And then that's all to say, all these events only further assured that Bitcoin is the only medium that people can actually bank on. So we saw a huge spike in people actually using Bitcoin, both in terms of remittances, savings, paying for school fees. And then USDT came into the mix, again, because of the restriction on the dollar. So for a lot of people, they're like, okay, I want dollar, but I want to be paid in dollars, so it has to be through USDT. So that confluence, or I guess that aggregation of all these economic challenges is the number one reason why a country like Nigeria is still at the forefront, because the ground-up approach really when it comes to adoption, people really understand that Bitcoin is cheap, instant global money that works for them, that allows them to save, that allows them to be economic participants on a global scale. So for us, those are the problems that Bitcoin solves, and I feel because of those reasons, that's why we'll continue to be at the forefront of both the innovation as well as being the safeguards and the guardians for the Bitcoin ecosystem and ensuring that it continues to provide that not just for Nigerians, but for people around the globe.
Wow. I think I need to watch that back on the recording at 0.5x speed to really process it. But if I could try to put it into more like average Joe talk, because of the arrival of Bitcoin and to an extent crypto in Nigeria, what with stable coins, that's caused this currency instability, let's say, and because the government has the monopoly on the creation of money, it sees this risk and it tries to clamp down on it. But in clamping down on it and trying to innovate and try to create these things like CBDCs, it creates a cluster, well, for want of a better word, a clusterfuck of currencies,
Exactly.
which all have different exchange rates, which means that the layperson, the man on the street, is unable to transact on a day-to-day basis. Enter Bitcoin, and you have a decent, viable solution. Okay, so bullish on Nigeria, sort of medium turn in terms of finally coming around to Bitcoin. I wanted to sort of go deeper on that with both you and Jack, because in lots of countries around the world, they don't have the privilege of having Bitcoin as being legal. You know, in Nigeria, we saw the Binance executives being locked up. It wasn't for Bitcoin stuff, of course. It was for the currency stuff you allude to. But does that not worry you as a developer, a Bitcoin Core contributor living in Nigeria, seeing a Binance executive being locked up? Are you not thinking, oh, crap, better be careful when I land back in Abuja in a couple of weeks?
I mean, like, Nigeria is just a vibe, to be honest. Like, most of us are just running on vibes, and inshallah is what we say. The truth is, Nigeria is chaotic, but in a beautiful way. The chaos allows for certain emergent properties like Bitcoin adoption to take place and innovation as a result of all the adversity. On the Binance side, it was interesting. The government actually called the Binance executives to negotiate with the government, and then we extended their stay, to say the least, to the point where they still have one Binance executive in Abuja who was from house arrest and now to an actual jail.
So you call that just an extension of a stay?
That's an extension of a stay.
It's just a cell rather than a hotel room.
They didn't reach any middle ground, for sure. In general, I think, honestly, I'm not too afraid because we've seen waves of this through multiple, industries, fintechs, all of that, where people felt people that were doing scamming and all of that are part of one large camp of innovators in general. And we're seeing the same thing in Bitcoin because, again, scams came in through as like the medium that people were exposed to Bitcoin back in 2017, 18, with all these people saying, I'll buy Bitcoin for you, and then at the end of the day, they scammed them, they actually didn't buy Bitcoin. So for a lot of people, there's a sour taste in the mouth. But again, on the currency side, the government does feel that participation of Bitcoin and opening up that economy means that there will be currency manipulation. They do have a point to a certain extent in the sense that, yes, people moving out of the national currency and essentially going into USD, whether it's NGN-USD, NGN-USDT, does affect the currency price itself. So they are trying to battle two things. There are some that are progressive on the government side, trying to foster and allow for this economic development growth. But then they also have an obligation at the state level to ensure that local currency still is a useful money. So balancing these two things is at odds with each other, essentially, because you're trying to say, we want people to be economically progressive, develop, all of that, but then the means in which they can get that is through Bitcoin, enabling a fostering environment for Bitcoin to thrive, like Bitcoin mining and things like that. So it's difficult for them to square those two circles, but at least they're making some strides, I say, that make sense, which is free-floating the Naira, which they did, removing the oil subsidy because, again, we can't afford to subsidize oil. We were pretending for decades to do so. So we're at a point where we have two parts, really, to go for in Nigeria moving forward. It's either the government accepts that it's in their best interest to allow for Bitcoin innovation to progress and proceed in the continent because there'll be a lot more economic opportunities that could help on the economic side, both in terms of policy, foreign investments, or they could continue to stick their head in the sand like they did in 2021, which to me is the biggest reason why we have a big P2P market, is try to ban as many things as possible. So either way, Bitcoin still wins for the average individual, but if they really want to help on a wide scale, I think the government has to be on board.
Yeah, I really like the first option there. Yeah, the El Salvador option. Okay, but clearly it's an incredibly complex issue, and it's moving in all sorts of directions. We're not sure where it's going yet. Kind of like China, no? I mean, China famously banned Bitcoin, but in reality, it was never banned. And when I was in China 2 weeks ago, I was like, okay, let's put this to the test. So I sent some Bitcoin to a friend in Europe. I sent some Bitcoin over Lightning, so the Layer 2 network, and I also... I can't remember what else I did. I did all sorts of like Bitcoin things to ensure that you can actually do that. And then I did the thing of going on BBC and The Guardian and Facebook, and obviously all those sites were banned. So I was like, okay, well, Bitcoin mining, it may or may not be banned. It's just, well, you're going to answer that for me. But Bitcoin itself is not banned in China because I am proof. I have not trusted and I've verified it. So what is the status right now? Like, what is the status for not just China, of course, Southeast Asia, with regards to Bitcoin and its legality?
I think most countries in Asia-Pacific region, still, I think even China, they treat Bitcoin as the property, So even what people talk about China government ban Bitcoin is the ban Bitcoin for sending the money out for the capital control, which has already been in place for years. So you own Bitcoin, and then as a digital, as your property, as your asset, I think that's okay. There's some quote, I think in Jiangsu or Shanghai, the rule, the guy who wallet got hacked, he won. So he got back his Bitcoin, something like that. So if a Bitcoin is illegal in China, just like a drug, right? You have to be confiscated, right? So I think owning Bitcoin is not that illegal. However, if you use a Bitcoin to do some activity against the law, that's not okay. Yeah, but I also heard about Indonesia, maybe that's the most strict. Yeah, for doing that. So I would say in general, I think owning Bitcoin in most of the Asia Pacific region is okay. Then but you just don't. For example, Taiwan, they put very clear if you against the anti-money laundering law, then that's not okay. So similar rule apply.
Okay, just be careful, basically. Okay, look, we've gone a bit heavy and dark here. Rikki, with Bitcoin Explorers, you travel all around the world documenting Bitcoin adoption, but you also have what appears to be a really nice time. For a lot of these people in the audience right now, they've probably got some Bitcoin. They're probably thinking, where can I travel with my Bitcoin quite easily? Where is the state of Bitcoin enabling me to have perhaps a really nice Bitcoin-themed holiday? Do you have any travel advice for people in the audience?
So many options, because it turns out Bitcoiners love beautiful places. Go out. So no, there are really several options especially for a holiday. Central America has amazing Bitcoin communities to explore. Of course, there's El Salvador. We all know that it's an amazing place, though it's a beautiful country. Let me say this. If you guys want to go to El Salvador, please do it, but visit the entire country. Don't just stay in San Salvador and at the Bitcoin beach. Those places are amazing, but the rest of the country, it's even better. So don't be afraid to go to explore more. But for example, Guatemala, Lake Bitcoin, Lago Bitcoin in Panajachel is a beautiful place. It's on a lake, it's a natural beauty, and there is a strong adoption there. It's not a city. It's a big town, very touristic. So you can do whatever you want with Bitcoin there. You can sleep, of course, have a coffee. You can even dance. There is a club that accepts Bitcoin. You can go dancing, get completely drunk, and pay for your hangover in Bitcoin. And Bitcoiners can take their family there. Your wives are not going to be bored. There's plenty to do also for non-Bitcoin geeks. Costa Rica, the Bitcoin jungle is amazing. Picture yourself the stereotypical tropical paradise. That's Uvita, Costa Rica. Huge adoption there as well. Huge adoption. A lot of merchants accept Bitcoin. There is a circular economy actually going on there. But more recently, for example, I traveled to Asia, in the Philippines, on the Boracay Island. There is this place called Bitcoin Island. Adoption is okay. It needs to improve. But the island itself is fantastic. White sand, blue sea,
Sunset.
Amazing sunsets. So there are a lot of options, and it's so cool to travel in Bitcoin and to see how uniquely Bitcoin interacts in different places with different societies. That's when you realize that this is the power of Bitcoin. It's such a crazy tool that everyone takes what they need and shape his local community locally. That's fantastic because it's bottom-up adoption. Let's face it, it works better than top-down, way better.
And to steal what Ben Bitcoin Sessions would have said about the top-down, bottom-up sorry, bottom. What am I saying?
Bottom up, top down.
It's been a long few days.
I know.
Thank you, Rikki.
You're nailing it, though, Joe.
You too.
Thank you.
If it was top down, then governments would have done it already. So it has to be, bottom up, grassroots Bitcoin adoption. So I hope you're taking notes for travel inspiration. These places are kid-friendly, wife-friendly, or even husband-friendly. I'm surprised. One thing I'm a bit worried is that you didn't mention Bedford in there at all.
Oh, yeah, but that's because Peter is not here.
Oh, okay, got it, yeah. Fantastic. Okay, we're going to transition now to the state of Bitcoin. And I wanted to ask you a quick question, Parker, on this. Of course, your book, your recently published book is Gradually, Then Suddenly. But Bitcoin has been around for 15 years now. And for some of us that have been in it a long time, like yourself, like Jack, like I'm sure some OGs in the audience as well, sometimes it feels a little bit slow. I'm asking this for my behalf and also for the audience behalf. When is the suddenly? When are we going to have that, state of adoption click?
Yes, so what I would say is, first, there's always a recency bias in Bitcoin in terms of things feeling slow, right? But if you think about it, at the last halving, Bitcoin was a tenth of the price equivalent, right? And so, and that's a massive amount of adoption that has had to happen between then and now to actually sustain this level of liquidity. And so I think we're actually progressing a lot faster, but the volatility of Bitcoin, the bear markets, they just feel long. But like one piece of context from Texas is that we've gone from about 500 megawatts on our grid to nearly 3 gigawatts. Just yesterday, one of the chairpersons from ERCOT, which is the Texas grid, was giving testimony to the legislature specifically about how Bitcoin can help them increase reliability of the grid. That's the point that we're at. So it's important to remember, while things always feel slow and we wish our friends would get it faster, that in 2017, the Bitcoin mining exahash, we haven't talked about that, was 5 exahashes. Now it's about 700.
What does that mean for the layperson?
So, I mean, just as an order of magnitude, the number of hashes per second that are being guessed and checked to secure the Bitcoin network, to enforce the fixed supply and confirm all valid Bitcoin transactions. But just thinking about the fact that it's grown 140 times from 5 exahashes to 700 exahashes, in 4 or 5, 6 years, right? So just recognizing that we're actually moving a lot faster than it always feels day to day. And then what I would say to your question about when will the suddenly happen, it's hard to predict. I think it's in the next 10 years. And I think it's in the next 2 halvings, right? It's just thinking about knowledge distribution accelerating because Bitcoin is adopted as knowledge distributes. But I want to present a hopeful view of this. And maybe, Abubakar, you've seen this, that people will flock to Bitcoin when they have to.
Yeah.
There will be a layer of conscious adoption, but if we look at what might happen in Lebanon or in Argentina or in Venezuela, and I'm not talking about Bitcoin, but when their currencies begin to fail, they go to the dollar or they try to get into anything else that's actually working. And that my view of it is that when a G3 currency hyperinflates, which I do think is inevitable, and I don't say that in a bad way, because currencies do hyperinflate, and we just have to be objective about it, and Bitcoin is the light at the end of the tunnel. It would be very unfortunate if we didn't have that everyone will flock to Bitcoin and demand it because they have to, and it will happen when one of those 3 currencies, the yen, euro, or dollar, really begins to stop functioning as a day-to-day currency.
Yeah, is it kind of bad that I kind of hope it's the euro? So we all end up flocking to Bitcoin. Do you want to jump in there, Rikki?
When do you see it happening? What's your time frame for this collapse, for this
I don't think it's not a collapse, right? Because if you...
It's hyperinflation...
the economic system continues to work, and if it can work on Bitcoin, or if it can continue to work on dollars, so I don't view it as a collapse. It's certainly a period of economic instability, but not collapse, because there's a working currency, and that's Bitcoin. I find it difficult to believe that Bitcoin adoption does not increase 100 times in the next 10 years, 2 halving cycles. And if you think about what 100 times means, it's far larger than the US dollar. And when it's the largest currency system in the world, it's probably when it becomes a lot easier to see and everyone flocks for the access. So I believe that it's in the next, 8 years would be two halvings, so 8 to 10 years.
Cool. We'll be ready, and I'm sure that some of these guys will be on a paradise island that Rikki recommended earlier to experience that moment. We're coming up to the last few minutes. We've had a really good discussion so far, but I want the audience to go away with something. Europe is 44 countries, could be 45 soon, who knows. So many languages spoken here, a couple of 100 million people live here. What is one thing you would want every European sat in this room to go home with to their respective state to help encourage, to help, promote Bitcoin adoption? Or maybe they shouldn't, maybe it's inevitable. What do you think, Abubakar? What should people go away with from this talk today?
Yeah, definitely. I think the one thing that's pertinent to all of us around the world is regulation. And I think the battle is going to be fought in Europe. And I think for folks that are in the crowd that are either close to regulators or are close to people around the world who are doing things around Bitcoin mining, for example, for electrification in Africa, should really band together to help preserve and ensure that regulatory clarity is really a top priority for us, because all regulation that is passed in Europe gets adopted in parts like Africa. Same thing in the US. So that's what I would say people should be banding together, because it's going to help the benefit for everyone, essentially.
And of course, Miko is just on the horizon for Europe, generally speaking. Jack, what do you think we should go away with from this panel today?
Yeah, as I said earlier, in Asia, still being dominated by crypto and then Web3, etc. Right? So I think the most important thing, just like what we are doing every day, is that continue education. So we want to. This is our goal. This is our team, our company's goal. Educate people Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, hodl Bitcoin, and love Bitcoin, and later bring Bitcoin with love.
And let the sats flow. Beautiful sentiment. Perfect. Parker, what should we be going home with today? Should we all start plugging in miners?
You're going to have a hard time competing with Texas, but you should try. Everyone should try. I would say, echoing Jack, education is the most important thing. My perspective on that is people need to filter into Bitcoin, give them the opportunities to filter in, invite your friends to local meetups, encourage you to start a local meetup if you don't have one. They do matter. And don't force Bitcoin onto people, but let them know about Bitcoin events, and the ones that are interested will come, and those people will be far more receptive. And then just the second thing is just a reminder on a personal level that there are unalienable rights, and access to Bitcoin is one of them. It doesn't mean that you get Bitcoin, but that we should all have access to Bitcoin. Those rights don't come from other men. They don't come from government. They don't come from society. And that's important to remember, too, when all this regulation comes, that Bitcoin is a permissionless network and that we don't need permission. That doesn't mean that rules of law don't exist, but that unalienable rights do, and access to Bitcoin is one of them.
Super point. Absolutely super. Rikki, take us home. What should we go home with?
Bitcoin, the protocol itself, it's set in stone, but we still have to work on it. Multiple layers. Bitcoin has to scale, has to be easier to scale, and we need more apps. We need more apps, and we need better apps. So the best thing you can do in Europe or all over the world, I think, is to test this technology. And testing Bitcoin means using Bitcoin. So the best way to support Bitcoin development and the Bitcoin ecosystem is hodl, spend, and replace.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure and a delight spending some time with you all. Thank you so much for listening in. I hope you've taken notes, and I hope you go back to your respective one of the 44 states with some fresh information. Please give a massive round of applause to Rikki, to Abubakar, to Parker, and to Jack. Thank you so much, and enjoy Prague.